There is a version of you hidden beneath the ashes of obedience, a self buried, not by accident but by design. You were taught to kneel before comfort, to beg for approval, to whisper when you should roar. They named it virtue, but it was training. You were trained to be soft, to nod when you should question, to wait when you should strike. The chains they placed on you were forged with compliments, with warnings, with rules. Be kind, they said, and kindness became your cage. Be patient, they whispered, and patience became your sedation. Trust, they demanded, and trust became the rope around your will. This isn't morality. This is control disguised as love, and you accepted it. You wore the mask, you followed the script, and it led you to a life where you are touched, moved, and broken by anyone bold enough to try. But deep inside you, there is something untouched, something cold, sharp, awake. A version of you that hears every insult but doesn't flinch, that sees manipulation and smiles, that doesn't crave to be understood, only respected or feared. This version does not explain itself. It does not seek mercy. It does not need permission. This version watches, calculates, and waits. And when it moves, it devastates. That version is not cruel, it is sovereign. It is the you that was never broken, only hidden. The world does not want that version to awaken, because that version cannot be controlled. That version will not apologize for its fire. It will not dim itself for the comfort of sheep. If you're ready to awaken that side of yourself, the side that cannot be tamed, then stay. Like this message. Subscribe. Not for me, but for the part of you that's been silent too long. Let's tear off the mask. You were not born to be prey, but they fed you stories of humility, of patience, of quiet endurance, and called it strength. They showed you saints who bled for others and told you to imitate. But saints are useful only to those who benefit from their sacrifice. Look closely at those who preach forgiveness without consequence. They are often the ones who have something to gain from your silence. Every time you bend to preserve the peace, every time you explain yourself to be understood, you shrink. You trade your sovereignty for acceptance, and that acceptance is hollow, temporary, conditional. It is a leash disguised as love, but there is a way out, a way to stop bleeding for others. You don't need to become cruel. You need to become untouchable. You need to kill the version of you that bleeds too easily, forgives too quickly, trusts too blindly. That version of you is not good, it's weak, and weakness is a scent predators never ignore. This is not self-help, this is war, and the battlefield is your own psyche. The enemy is the obedient self, trained by a society that worships mediocrity and punishes independence. You've been taught that goodness means harmlessness, but harmlessness is not virtue, it's surrender. The untouchable version of you must be reborn in fire. It doesn't need applause, it needs silence and precision. It does not act from emotion, but from intent. When others provoke, it calculates. When others plead, it observes. It does not defend itself because it knows. Truth doesn't negotiate. To build this new self, you must strip away every habit of justification, every impulse to seek sympathy, every fear of rejection. This version of you has one code: move with discipline, speak with weight, and never explain. If someone cannot feel your presence without understanding you, let them remain in confusion. Their confusion is your armor. They will call you cold. Let them. They will say you've changed, and they will be right. Because the old version of you died. The version that smiled to avoid conflict, that softened its truth to be accepted, that explained its soul to people who came only to feed off it, that version is gone. And in its place, a fortress. You do not owe softness to a world that thrives on sharpness. You do not owe your openness to those who weaponize it. You were taught to be transparent, but transparency makes you a target. Now you learn opacity. You learn silence. You learn to hold your energy like a blade behind your back. They will test you. They will call your distance arrogance, your calm a threat, your refusal to react a problem. Let them talk. You are not here to be understood by sheep. You are here to become the wolf that walks alone, not out of hatred, but out of clarity. Machiavelli understood this. Loyalty fades, love fluctuates, but power respects only discipline. That is your new foundation. You do not respond from emotion. You respond from design. You do not explain, you act. The fortress mind is built brick by brick, with each choice to withdraw instead of react, each time you observe instead of defend, each moment you endure silence instead of begging to be heard. Power does not beg, it waits. And when it moves, it does so not to prove, but to end. This version of you is not impulsive. It is not loud. It does not need to prove strength because strength is now its nature. The days of justifying your boundaries are over. The days of proving your worth are buried. You do not chase, you attract through gravity, through presence, through the silence of someone who knows exactly who they are, and who will never again hand over that knowing for comfort. You were trained to believe that being feared is a flaw, but fear is not evil, it's clarity. It means people recognize consequences. It means they hesitate before trying to use you. And in a world driven by manipulation, hesitation is protection. When people no longer fear disappointing you, they begin to test you. When they no longer feel your boundaries like iron walls, they walk through them like mist. That's when respect dies, not with a scream, but with a smile and a favor asked too many times. The fortress mind ends this. It's not about domination, it's about establishing terrain, a territory where no one enters unless invited, where every smile is deliberate, where every silence means something. You are not cruel, you are precise. You are not distant, you are reserved. You don't withhold affection, you decide who is worthy of it. And that decision is not made by emotion, it's made by observation. Cold power doesn't shout, it echoes. It's not the fire that burns once and fades. It's the winter that reshapes entire landscapes. The untouchable version of you is not theatrical, it's surgical. It removes parasites not with rage but with removal. Quiet, total, no warnings, no farewells. When you are unreadable, no one can prepare for your moves. When you are emotionally invisible, no one can bind you. The fortress mind doesn't isolate you, it liberates you. You can still love, still feel, still connect, but never again will someone be able to reach into your soul and rearrange your peace. That part of you is locked, sacred, private, and anyone who believes they deserve access must earn it, not with charm, not with promises, but with discipline equal to yours. You are no longer a mirror for others to project onto. You are your own presence, clear, cold, and sovereign. There is a reason manipulators avoid the strong. Not because they fear pain, but because they fear confusion. Manipulators need clarity to operate. They thrive on knowing your triggers, your weaknesses, your boundaries, and most of all, your need to be liked. Remove that need and you remove their oxygen. The fortress mind does not crave clarity in others. It creates mystery in itself. You become unreadable, unpredictable, unfazed. They insult you. You say nothing. They provoke you. You smile. They lie and you disappear. And that silence, that lack of drama, that refusal to play their game becomes your power. Let them wonder. Let them spiral. Let them beg for a reaction that never comes. You are not cold. You are controlled. And control is not about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering when, where, and why emotion is expressed. Emotion is now a weapon, not a weakness. You are no longer a participant in every conflict thrown your way. You choose your wars. You select your timing. This is what Machiavelli meant by strategy. You strike when it matters, not when you're provoked. Most people respond to every insult, every rumor, every jab, and in doing so, they announce their weaknesses. You don't. You wait. You watch. You calculate. And when the moment arrives, you move with precision so sharp it feels like fate. There's no anger, no revenge speech, just consequence, silent and total. The person who once tried to cross you finds themselves isolated, discredited, erased, and no one even saw it coming. That is the final form of strength, not power flaunted, but power felt, the kind that makes others whisper your name with caution. You didn't become this way by accident. You built it, brick by painful brick, and now you are untouchable because you've stopped needing to be touched. There is a reason people fear silence. It reveals. In silence, they see their reflection, unfiltered, their tactics, their games, their dependence on your validation. all exposed. The fortress mind lives in that silence. It does not rush to correct rumors. It does not panic to restore reputation. It understands something deeper. Your truth is not public property. When you stop explaining yourself, you become unpredictable. When you stop seeking understanding, you become uncontrollable. Most people are addicted to being seen clearly. You become the fog, and in that fog, you cannot be touched, cannot be aimed at, cannot be destroyed, because they can't find where to strike. That's the power of stillness, that's the weapon of restraint, and it's a weapon most will never wield, because it requires letting go of ego. It requires becoming indifferent to applause, to reputation, to narrative. But in that indifference, you gain everything. You gain time, energy, freedom, because now no one can summon you with a whisper. No one owns your triggers. No one drags you into battles that aren't worth fighting. You decide when to speak and when you speak. People listen, because your words are rare, and rarity is value. You've stopped bleeding for every friend. You've stopped explaining every boundary. You've stopped inviting the world to interpret your soul. Instead, you observe, you measure, you wait. You let others expose themselves. You let them believe you are passive, and then, when the moment aligns, you act, not to punish, but to complete the equation. Every insult has a cost. Every betrayal leaves a trail, and you've stopped forgiving debts that were never repaid. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You no longer run toward peace. You stand still and let others decide if they can handle your silence. Most cannot. Weakness doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it forgives too quickly, hopes too easily, trusts too fast. And each time it does, it opens the gate to exploitation. The fortress mind has learned this. Not everyone deserves a second chance, and very few deserve a first. Loyalty without scrutiny is not virtue. It's vulnerability. You must inspect intentions like a gatekeeper. You must question affection that arrives too fast, too eager. Manipulators move quickly because truth slows them down. But you move slowly, like a glacier, deliberate, unstoppable, ancient. The weak crave connection at any cost. The strong understand that solitude is not punishment, it's power. It is the space where clarity sharpens, where instincts align. The untouchable self is not lonely. It is full, with its own presence, its own mind, its own law. You were not made to beg for belonging. You were made to decide who's allowed near the fire. And those who cross your fire, they don't get warnings. The new version of you is not theatrical. It's surgical. Betrayal is not met with drama, but with deletion. Quiet. Final. You do not chase explanations. You do not offer closure. The moment someone shows you who they are, you believe it, and you move accordingly. They call it cold. You call it calibrated. You no longer leave doors half open. You close them completely. Because the fortress has no back door, no just-in-case policies. Only standards, and those standards are enforced without emotion. Not because you lack compassion, but because you've seen what compassion unguarded becomes. Exhaustion. You're done bleeding for people who bring knives. You're done explaining to people who don't listen. You're done hoping people will change when they've shown you who they are. Now you reward consistency, and you punish inconsistency with distance. Every emotion you let rule you becomes a handle someone else can pull. Anger, when visible, becomes bait. Need, when obvious, becomes leverage. This is why the fortress mind does not display, it absorbs. Not to suppress, but to process internally, like a blacksmith forging steel. You no longer react to insult. You record. You no longer explain your decisions. You let results speak. Emotion is not your enemy, but emotional leakage is. You contain, you direct, you act when it matters. Most people live in reaction like leaves in the wind. You are the mountain, immovable, unimpressed, calculating. That doesn't make you inhuman. It makes you precise. Even your kindness is measured. Even your presence is earned. You've seen what happens when you're too open. They crawl in, decorate your soul with their needs, and then resent you for not giving more. Never again. Now you train for discomfort, not because you enjoy pain, but because pain reveals truth. When you deny yourself comfort voluntarily, you become immune to the world's coercion. You fast, not just from food, but from praise, attention, validation. You do the work when no one watches. You say no when it Burns, you hold the silence when your ego begs to speak. This is discipline, not denial. This is the cold forge where your real self is built. And the world, watching from the outside, will never understand. They'll call it obsession. They'll call it pride. But what they fear to name is power. You've stopped being manipulated by ease. Now you seek the edge, because the edge sharpens you. Comfort softens, routine hardens, and you've chosen to become a weapon, not for war, but for survival. A man, with nothing to prove but everything to protect. That protection starts with restraint. They told you betrayal is rare, a tragic accident in the story of trust. But the fortress mind knows. Betrayal is not an exception. It's a rule. Loyalty lasts only as long as it is profitable. People change, masks fall, incentives shift. And when they do, the ones you called friend, brother, even love, can turn. The untouchable self expects it, not with paranoia, but with preparation. You don't build your foundation on their words. You build it on patterns, consistency, integrity over time. And even then, you prepare for collapse. Because when betrayal comes, you don't want to feel shocked. You want to feel ready. You want to watch it with cold eyes, knowing you saw the signs. The weak call this cynicism. The strong call it insurance, because you cannot afford to give your peace away to the shifting tides of someone else's loyalty. So now you keep receipts, not for revenge, but for clarity. You study the way people disappear when you stop bleeding for them. You notice who respects silence, who respects boundaries, who doesn't demand explanations. And those few, you hold close. But even then, not too close, because the final fortress is not built around your house. It is built around your mind. No one should own your center. No one should have the keys to your peace. You are no longer at the mercy of affection. You give it when it aligns with your mission, and retract it when it threatens your focus. Cold? No. It's warmth with a lock, kindness with criteria, trust with a test. You've learned it's not about hating others. It's about refusing to hate yourself by letting the wrong people too close. A boundary is not cruelty, it's survival. Patience is not weakness. In the fortress mind, patience becomes a blade. The strong don't strike first. They strike last, when it matters most. The world teaches urgency. Defend yourself now. Speak now. React now. But urgency is a trick, a tactic of the weak to pull you into battles you didn't choose. The untouchable man does not move on command. He waits. He endures disrespect without flinching. He studies before he moves. And when he moves, it is final. Strategic patience turns enemies into fools. They mistake your silence for passivity. They lower their guard. They speak too freely. They expose too much. And when the moment comes, you move, not out of rage, but with surgical intention. Revenge served cold? No. It's not revenge, it's balance. The universe answers through you. No screaming, no spectacle, just consequence. The weak live to be understood. They broadcast every wound, every plan, every desire, hoping someone will validate their pain. But the fortress mind lives in mystery. It reveals nothing it does not choose. You are no longer readable. Your eyes calm, your tone measured, your presence controlled. The less they know, the more they fear. This is not manipulation. This is preservation. Because when they can't predict you, they can't trap you. Your silence is not absence, it's power. Let them guess, let them invent stories. Let them fill the void with fear. You speak less and mean more. You act rarely and leave impact. This aura you build is your armor, not to push others away, but to protect the core. They can attack your image, your name, your noise, but the essence, untouched, unreachable, unknown. You've stopped fighting battles that others choose. That's the strategy. So of rulers, that's Machiavelli. Manipulators will provoke you with rumors, with accusations, with carefully crafted insults, all to drag you into their arena. But if you react, you lose, because now you're on their stage, under their spotlight, playing their script. The fortress mind does not perform. It dismantles, quietly, precisely, without warning. You do not respond to noise. You silence it. You do not defend your name. You make theirs irrelevant. You do not chase justice. You become the consequence. The moment you remove yourself from their stage, they lose their audience, and when you strike, it's not to hurt, it's to end. They won't even know what hit them until their foundation crumbles. That is power. Not loud, not theatrical, but permanent. You've also become unreadable, and that's no accident. You understand that manipulators require access to your thoughts, your fears, your rhythms, so you give them nothing. Not anger, not clarity, not explanation. They bait you, and you blink slowly. They provoke, and you smile faintly. They assume and you offer silence. This drives them mad, because they need something to grab. But you've become a shadow, visible but ungraspable, and in their desperation they misstep. They project. They collapse under the weight of their assumptions. This is not cruelty. This is design. You don't show your plan. You show fragments. You don't show your strength. You show restraint. The unknown becomes your ally, because fear doesn't grow from what's visible. It grows from what's hidden. Loyalty must be managed like fire, useful when contained, deadly when taken for granted. The fortress mind understands this. People don't respect unconditional acceptance. They value what they must earn. So you reward loyalty, yes, but never with comfort. You keep them alert, grateful, aware that your favor is not permanent, not to create fear, but to sustain respect. Because when people believe they own your loyalty, they stop working to deserve it. They become lazy, entitled, bold, and bold allies unchecked become threats. So you show your recognition, calm, measured, never indulgent. Let them wonder if they've done enough. Let them work to stay close. And if they cross the line, if they betray, you do not lecture, you do not explode, you disappear. No closure, no debate, just absence. That is the cost of disrespect in your world. This is not theater. This is architecture. Every rule you enforce, every silence, you hold every bond you sever with precision. It's part of a larger design. The fortress mind doesn't simply protect, it projects, and that projection must radiate cold clarity. You are no longer just a man. You are a presence others consider before speaking, before acting, before plotting. And this presence is built not on fear, but on consequence. You've become the man who requires no threats, because your history speaks louder than your words. They've seen what happens when people overstep. They've felt the distance that never returns, and that reputation walks into rooms before you do. That is your shield now. Not strength in the moment, but the memory of what happened to those who forgot who they were dealing with. Machiavelli warned rulers, never allow unity among your enemies. Division is survival. The fortress mind brings this into the social realm. You don't wait for threats to form, you dismantle them before they gather. You notice the alliances forming in silence, the friendships that threaten your order, and with subtlety you sow doubt. Not lies, just perspective. You ensure that those who could challenge you never fully trust each other. You scatter seeds of hesitation, a glance, a pause, a whisper. You shift the ground beneath their feet before they ever think of standing together. This is not paranoia, this is insurance. The world isn't fair, and power doesn't thrive in naivety. If you allow others to organize against you, you've already lost. A divided threat is a diffused one, and you've chosen to be a fortress surrounded by shifting sands, never by solid ground where enemies can march. Let your strength become a myth. That's the final lesson. The fool shouts every victory, posts every success, flaunts every weapon, but this makes him a target. Machiavelli understood, true power isn't visible, it's felt. Let them wonder, let them whisper, let them imagine your capabilities, your reach, your revenge. Because imagination always paints a more terrifying picture than reality. When you move, do it quietly. When you win, vanish before applause. When you lose, make it seem intentional. Let them believe you're always 3 steps ahead, even when you're standing still. This illusion is not deception, it's defense. Because the more they speculate, the less they act. The more they fear what they cannot see, the more control you hold. The fortress mind doesn't just survive confrontation, it prevents it by becoming untouchable in reputation long before action is required. Understand this, Power that isn't permanent is just performance, a mask, a mood, a role you play until pressure unmasks you. But the fortress mind, it's not a mask. It's structure, it's lifestyle, it's the law you live by when no one's watching. Because real power doesn't exist in public approval. It exists in private discipline. It's how you speak when you're tired, how you stand when you're alone, how you decide when no reward is promised. Machiavelli warned that power is harder to hold than to seize, and most lose it the moment they think they've won. Comfort is the deadliest enemy. It whispers, "You've earned rest." It tempts, "You've proven enough." And that's when the cracks begin. That's when the fortress forgets it needs guards. And the moment you let your standards drop for anyone, they will notice, and they will test you. So you must hold the line, not once, always, every day. Especially when you don't feel like it. Especially when victory feels close. Discipline must become your identity. Your routine must replace your moods. Because if your strength depends on conditions, it's not strength, it's luck. You don't train just to win. You train so that weakness never finds an open door. And you guard your circle with the same precision. Those who stand beside you either sharpen your edge or dull it. There is no neutrality. And the moment someone shows disregard for your standards, your time, your law, they are removed. No drama, no delay. Because a fortress that lets the wrong guests inside will fall from the inside. The wolves don't need to storm the gates if the gatekeeper is weak. And you are no longer weak. You've learned that retreat is not surrender. It's strategy. The untouchable man doesn't need to fill every space or dominate every conversation. Sometimes he vanishes, not in fear, but in design. Because absence creates tension. It breeds questions. It forces others to fill the silence with their own doubts. They wonder why you've pulled back. They analyze your quiet like a prophecy. And in that uncertainty, you hold power. Machiavelli said, "Men fear what they cannot see." So you become the presence that remains even when unseen. You withdraw to sharpen, to observe, to prepare. Not every moment demands your sword. Some moments require only your shadow, cast long enough to make others step carefully. That's how you maintain control, not through noise, but through contrast. Let others be loud. Let them explain themselves to death. You stay unreadable. And in that unreadability lies dominance. Even those closest to you must never fully possess your mind. Warmth does not mean access. Loyalty does not mean ownership. You must remain slightly out of reach, not to punish but to preserve power. Because when people believe they fully understand you, they grow careless. And careless allies become liabilities. So let them earn your presence again and again. Let them know your kindness but never assume it's permanent. You are a flame, visible, useful, powerful, but never one they can contain. The fortress mind draws people in, but only to the outer walls. The core remains yours alone, because that's the only way to protect it from betrayal, from comfort, from the slow decay of overexposure. You've chosen to be untouchable, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Because every time you let your guard fall in the name of connection, you risk everything you've built. Discipline is now your nature. Not something you wear, something you are. The untouchable man does not wait for motivation. He moves by law, his own. He acts not when it's convenient, but when it's required. Mood is irrelevant. Pain is irrelevant. Fatigue, loneliness, distraction, all irrelevant. Because if your mission can be derailed by a feeling, it was never a mission. It was a whim. The fortress mind does not serve the moment. It serves the code. Routine becomes sacred. Standards become armor. And emotion. It becomes a tool, not a master. You're no longer asking, "Do I feel ready?" You've replaced it with, "What needs to be done?" And this shift, this cold shift, is what separates rulers from wanderers, kings from servants, permanence from performance. You don't just hold power, you embody it. It radiates from your posture, your presence, your refusal to flinch. Now, when they test you, there is nothing to test. When they try to break you, there is no crack to pry open. When they try to manipulate you, like there's no handle to pull, you've removed every lever they once used. Approval, irrelevant. Attention, optional. Need, eliminated. You no longer announce strength, you exude it. You no longer explain your path, you walk it. And the world, sensing this shift, treats you differently. The scavengers move on. The manipulators grow quiet. The parasites search for new hosts. You've changed the laws of your reality, not by asking, by enforcing. This is the final transformation. Cold power made permanent. It does not speak loudly, it does not beg to be seen. It is present in every action, every silence, every boundary held with steel. You've stopped performing strength. Now, you live it. You've dismantled the weak version of yourself. The compliant shell that bent under pressure, apologized for breathing too loud, explained itself to people who never deserved your truth. That version is dead. In its place stands something unshakable. The fortress mind, the aura of cold authority, the internal law that never bends. Not for love, not for fear, not for comfort. You've trained yourself to be calm in chaos, silent in accusation, and ruthless in correction. You no longer chase, you choose. You no longer react, you decide. You are no longer the man they call when they want something easy. You're the one they whisper about when they realize you cannot be moved. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You didn't ask for the world to be ruthless. You just refused to stay defenseless in it. Power is now posture. It's in the way you enter a room, the way you say no without hesitation, the way you disappear when needed and strike only when it counts. You've cut off every handle they once used to move you. You've stopped bleeding energy into unworthy hands. You've stopped broadcasting your soul to people too blind to see its worth. And in return, you've become the one thing the world cannot: manipulate. A man in control of himself. Let them call you cold. Let them call you arrogant. Let them call you evil. Their words are weapons of the weak, dull, predictable, ineffective. You don't owe them softness. You owe yourself strength. If they fear you, good. If they respect you, better. If they disappear, perfect. Because what matters now is not what they think. What matters is that you've become untouchable, not in theory, not in dreams, but in how you live, every damn day.